Let's talk about what happened with Pfizer. So a few days ago, for a few days, for a long time now, European leaders have been asking tough questions of the biopharmaceutical complex and the biopharmaceutical CEOs, asking them to come before European Parliament to answer some tough questions because we're not getting these answers from the United States. They're not doing this in Congress. So they brought AstraZeneca, they brought Johnson & Johnson, they brought Moderna. Noticeably absent, of course, was the CEO of Pfizer, because I guess Albert Bourla knew something. There he is, Albert Bourla. Knew stuff was about to hit the fan. Some crap was about to hit the fan. So decided, I'm going to send somebody. I'm going to send my lackey. I'm going to send somebody else to go and do this.
Now, a little context here is that the European Union was sort of lauded as the best region in the world for rolling out vaccine passports. There were QR codes right away. There were vaccine scanner apps, and most countries sort of went right along with, okay, you can't get on an airplane. You can't come into Disneyland, Paris. You can't we even went on this little Christmas light walk, which was outdoors with our kids. And they had people outdoors scanning QR codes with either a recent test or a recent negative COVID test or a vaccine certificate to walk around and see Christmas lights outdoors. And we were stopped with our children only and with masks every I want to say mile or so on this. So the European Union launched these vaccine certificates with a vengeance, and there was a lot of money and effort and compliance, which is why it's important to figure out, why do we do that? Was there really a reason to do that? Because it really did harm a lot of people's businesses and inconvenience a lot of people and cost people their jobs. So
yeah, and going to restaurants, one of our favorite restaurants, we all went, we're we don't have any of these certificates. What do we need to do? We want to eat here. And they're like, can you take a test right now and show that you're negative? And we're like, okay, so 20 minutes of tests later.
And that's sanitary. I'm going to shove something in my nose at the table,
yeah,
right?
What in the world, really? This is what we've got. We've been cooped up for so long. We just want to have some good food, for crying out loud. And just imagine how damning that is to the business, right? And how few people were showing up because just awful crushing of business, crushing of families, you name it. We know the story, right? So during a recent COVID-19 EU hearing, Pfizer's president of international developed markets, Janine Small, admitted that the vaccine had never been tested on its ability to prevent transmission, contrary to what was advertised and told to us around the world. So Robert Roos is a politician from the Netherlands who is a member of the European Parliament. And he asked this simple question of the Pfizer's president of international markets. Remember, the CEO was chicken shit and didn't show up, to answer these questions.
Well, also because there was news that he and Ursula von der Leyen had been exchanging texts for weeks in advance of the rollout, and everyone thought that was shady AF, right? Yeah, and so he did not want to have to show up and talk about texting with the head of the European Union about rolling out a vaccine to millions of people.
So and remember,
yeah,
remember the whole narrative of 2 weeks to flatten the curve. The only way you could flatten a curve was if you stopped transmission. That was the narrative that they were pumping hard at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And the way that we're going to do that is both to stay home and to take the vaccine. And that's what will do it. Right. So CEO Albert Bourla didn't show up. He was too scared to show up. So Janine Small was sent out there to answer some tough questions. And this might be one of the most amazing and important sound bites that I've seen this year. Watch this.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No.
No.
No, okay. Then
These, we had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
So we had to move.
Science.
We had to move at the speed of science.
we had this whole.
What the hell does that mean? We had to move at the speed of science. Maybe Philip,
Philip has something to say about this.
Philip, our microbiologist. I should mention Philip, who studied microbiology, who knows a thing or two about scientific trials. Molecular biology. So what does it mean to move at the speed of science? Not to throw you under the bus, Philip is our technical director, but...
No, that's fine. Like typically the speed of science would be if you formulate a study, you actually study things, you get it peer reviewed by other people. The speed of science is actually quite slow. Now, the speed of scientific studies, there's lots of them out there, but for it to eventually be accepted by the scientific community as a whole is a rigorous process. And it's supposed to be because it has to be replicatable by other people for it to be considered science.
Okay.
So the speed of science isn't necessarily fast and actually can be pretty thoughtful. Right. And it's reviewed by other people.
And this is just a completely illogical thing to say, that we had to move, meaning we had to move without science, basically, because she didn't have this science.
And didn't you know that this question was going to become, for crying out loud? Like, how are you not prepared? I mean, the laughter, we didn't know. Come on. And of course we didn't do this. And we were just moving at the speed of science. Go ahead, David.
What she should have said is we were moving at the speed of patents.
Yes.
Or the lack to secure the patents.
Or government contracts. We were moving at the speed of government contracts.
We were under such force because we knew we were going to lose out on billions of dollars if we didn't move at the speed of whatever.
Now, I just want to make clear that. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, she actually, in that same sentence was like, no, we didn't study that because we were moving at the speed of science. That's basically saying we did know science because we had to do the science.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. When you just sit back and think about how ridiculous it is. So,
I mean, look, we've all said silly things when we're put on the spot, but at the same time, she is there to testify on why these vaccines were forced on people in the vaccine passports, right? Because nobody was allowed to make a calculation of well, I'm a pretty healthy person. Maybe I would if I'm exposed to COVID, I think that I can do okay with it. So maybe I'd like to just take my chances. You were not allowed to take those chances because you were told that your body was a biological weapon that could spread it to more vulnerable people. So you couldn't walk around and expose, say, your elderly neighbor unless you had the vaccine. We were told that that was the reason for other people. So then if you had no idea that it would prevent the spread, which again, people were punished on the internet for saying, then why were the passports and the requirements a thing at all?
Yeah. A lot of people are in the chat are saying, hey, can you guys play it again? So let's play that again. Let's play that clip again if you can, Philip.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
Okay. No one asked them to put us at risk in order to save our lives.
And we needed to respond to the market. So that's what she's saying. We needed to move at this sort of fake speed of science in order to respond to the marketplace needs for these billions of dollars that we're going to receive for these vaccines. So Rob Roos had a viral tweet then shortly afterwards. And I want to get to his soundbite because he not only, this was what went viral, has been continuing to go viral, Rob's response to this. And then I want to play some more sound from him as well. So watch this.
If you don't get vaccinated, you're antisocial. This is what the Dutch Prime Minister and Health Minister told us, you don't get vaccinated just for yourself, but also for others. You do it for all of society. That's what I said. Today, this turned out to be complete nonsense. In a COVID hearing in the European Parliament, one of the Pfizer directors just admitted to me, at the time of introduction, the vaccine had never been tested on stopping the transmission of the virus. This removes the entire legal basis for the COVID passport. The COVID passport that led to massive institutional discrimination as people lost access to essential parts of society. I find this to be shocking, even criminal. Please watch the video until the end.
Voor u, mevrouw Small, heb ik de volgende vraag.
So then,
duidelijk antwoord.
So last night, then Tucker invited Robert on to talk post after this hearing and to break it down. And you just watch, like, I know Tucker very well. Just watch his eyes. He does not really give a lot of emotion in his face very often about something, but watch his response to what was had just unfolded during this hearing. Watch.
It really was a special moment. For the first time, Pfizer admitted that the vaccine was not tested on stopping the transmission of the virus when it entered the market. And this has massive implications. Governments pushed millions of people worldwide to get vaccinated by telling them, telling you to do it for your grandmother. And they tricked perfectly healthy young people into taking this jab using false arguments. And they used big words such as antisocial to sow an immense hatred against people who refuse to comply with the government's wishes.
Yes. Yes.
Well, then what I want to know, my question is, if Pfizer, like what we know today, if Pfizer knew this, there was no testing on transmission or anything, all of the data that we saw come out in the papers that we got suspended for reading, take all of that data together, what did these things really do then?
Right. Isn't that the
what did they do?
Isn't that the $100 billion question?
Well, I've seen some data parsed by Dr. John Campbell on his YouTube channel that does show that there is some data that shows that the vaccines lowered the transmission, lowered the hospitalization rate. And so, you know, Philip and David were arguing this morning in our groups about how it will take some time before we actually know.
But isn't that the point, right? The speed of science is slow, and we won't know for a few years. That was what we've been saying on this show for a year now or longer, which is we won't know. And a lot of the doctors who said they weren't going to even be a part of this, they weren't going to give this to their patients, who understood how clinical trials worked and how long it takes, that you need at least a few years of data before you even begin that process.
But there was no accounting for personal choice, period, right? So there was no one who could say, I'm not going to take it because my doctor and I have decided, because I'm prone to clotting, because I want to have a baby, because
there's a history of stroke. There's a history of stroke in my family.
Someone who wrote me on my redacted email that said that they had a bad reaction to a swine flu vaccine or something like that. It was like, I don't want to take this again. And then again, is punished, loses their livelihood. We were not allowed to make those personal calculations.
Yeah. And so Mark Stein brought up a great point. He says, you know, we were all told all sort of manner of crazy things, what the government was telling us. And Mark Stein, I love his take on things. And he had Rob on as well to break it down. It was a long night for Rob. Watch this.
Just to look at those governments, you'll remember that Monsieur Macron in France said he wanted to emmerder the unvaccinated, which is a rather rude word, approximates to the English. He wanted to really piss them off. If you look at Canada, for example, if you were unvaccinated, you were forbidden from getting on an aeroplane or a train. In some German states, you were forbidden from going to the supermarket to buy food to keep yourself alive. And it appears that this lady from Pfizer is now saying at the time they introduced this, they never had any evidence that it would stop transmission of the virus. So where did all these governments get the idea to tell us you can't go anywhere if you're unvaccinated?
Well, yeah, that is exactly what I was looking for, because I'm searching for this answer for 2 years now. And because it had such an impact on people's life, I really wanted to know. And, well, yeah, where is this coming from? It seems to be disinformation from our government. So, well, this is really something that the people who are responsible for this, in my opinion, if the impact was huge on people's lives, I think these people should be held responsible.
Yeah.
It's funny because he just asked him the thing that he is investigating. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just as upset about it as you. I don't have the answer for you.
When you think about the governments, of course, you think about the ridiculousness. Just think about New York State, right? Andrew Cuomo, who, as we read in Carol Roth's book, when she details this in the war on small business, right? And how COVID crushed small businesses, and how Andrew Cuomo put in place ridiculous laws at restaurants, and how bars had to serve food in order to be allowed to be open. So bars that never served food started selling like guacamole.
And then throwing most of it in the trash.
They're like, because no one wanted that. They just wanted the beer, but you couldn't be open unless you were serving food, because that was, and that was, Andrew Cuomo was saying we were following the science. Like, what science is there?
What science makes although guacamole, sure, is a healthful food.
Yeah, but what science is there that in order for you to be open and serve people, you need to have guacamole or some sort of a food substance that makes COVID less transmissible? Like, that's the ridiculous crap that we were being fed by these governments.
Yeah. I don't know, Philip,
Well,
is there molecular biology in guacamole that makes that safer?
Not that I'm aware of, but I have never done a specific study on guacamole. There were studies done, like even towards the beginning, where they did know, like there were scientific studies being done that did show that the virus was weakened with the application of the vaccine. But even like back then, they knew that it was still like, well, I'm not going to use the words because I don't know what YouTube's current
policy
status is on that. Yeah, policy. But one of the things that just kind of strikes me about this that we're talking about right now is that one of two things had to be true: that the government knew that this study hadn't been done, and they were saying it did anyway. Or the government didn't know, which means they didn't properly vet something that they pushed onto the population.
I think that it's the first answer.
I believe they knew.
I believe they knew.
They
as
went
well.
with it anyway.
And I believe we're seeing that now from governments around the world, and we're seeing that in court cases that are not necessarily in the United States. We're seeing it in Bolivia. We're seeing it in other areas and countries.
The case we covered in Canada, where they were rolling out vaccine requirements, and there was an email chain that showed the woman said, "Can you show me some science that I can use in the talking points as we roll this out?" Which showed that the cart came before the horse.
Right.
Did I use that idiom properly? They put the cart before the horse.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're seeing this in a number of court cases from different countries around the world. And of course, we've been following this cover up for almost 2 years on this show. We reported how Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, admitted that his company, Pfizer, had no data on the vaccine's effectiveness at stopping the transmission of COVID when it was approved in the United Kingdom and in America. Of course, Pfizer in the EU was already secretly worried that these things wouldn't do what they said they were going to do. We also knew that this information led to documents that talked about the leaked documents we showed on the show about the mRNA instability in the vaccines as well. That this leak of data a number of months ago talked about the instability of these vaccines. So there's just overwhelming mounting evidence about the trouble of this. And so if you're not waking up to this, if you're not aware of this, I keep seeing people talk about Nuremberg 2.0. And, Tucker asked Rob Roos this on the show last night, said, when are we going to see prosecution of people? Mm-hmm. When are we going to see people held to account criminally? Because it's not just like, oh, well, we were trying to do the right thing. No, you knew. You knew, and you lied to people, and you ruined their lives, and people died as a result. And I frankly, I'll never forgive. I was thinking about this afternoon, sort of a quiet afternoon, and I was thinking, I didn't get to see my father at the hospital who went there because of a stroke, and because we were not allowed to go there and kept away from my father. We weren't allowed to travel there. We weren't allowed to go in the hospital. We were lied to and told to stay away to see my father die. So I didn't get to see my father die.
Well, in fact, nobody did. He died alone. He was hospitalized just before Christmas and spent the last 6 weeks of his life isolated because COVID restrictions meant that not even one person could go and visit inside the hospital. So we were kept separate, and he got COVID in the hospital. So it's not us that kept it from him. He was isolated inside the hospital with COVID. And so it's not, it was extremely hard on Clayton and his family, but my father-in-law, who had no physical touch of anybody who he loved for the last 6 weeks of his life, is a real tragedy of the pandemic for our family.
I see so many people in the chat, Simon saying the same thing happened to him. Same thing. So many people saying this in the chat. And other people
same thing with our grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys as well.
I mean, and they could have so easily just come out and said, look, like the reality of the situation was like hospitals were being overwhelmed, and there was sufficient evidence that the vaccination reduced the amount of people in the hospitals. I mean, that those studies still hold up. Like that data is still coming in, and it still points in that direction. They could have just said that, like, hey, we're trying to keep the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed. This will reduce your risk of being hospitalized. Go with it. But they chose not to do that. They like had to go with this like I don't know what I say, like scorched earth policy on how we should get vaccinated.
Well, and also, I mean, we're not even allowed to talk about it here on the show. We're not even allowed to talk about it here on the show because we'll get blocked and banned, which is the entire other side of this, which is the natural, all of the well, first of all, natural immunity, and then also the additional side of it, which is the non-vaccine piece of this, which is what Dr. Peter McCullough has been talking about and writing about and was treating patients in his hospital with. And there was all sorts of natural cures and availability of medicines that were out there that were
alternatives.
Alternatives. So again, that's another big piece of this. I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too. It's like, yeah, maybe they were doing what they said with the hospitalizations, but there's a lot of data that come out in those documents from Pfizer that it's like, I would have rather taken the chance, like.
And you weren't given the choice, right?
Yes, we weren't given informed consent.
Yes.
Is the bottom line.
Information is power, and here's the information. Do with it what you want, and we're not going to control you and tell you how to live your life.